Good day, everyone. Uh, Welcome to the show. This is Saudi Arabia. It's me, Rémi. And in this episode, I'm going to share with you about the ridiculous 4 plus 1 degrees of the House of Saud Dictatorial ruling system. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge and pay respect uh, to the peoples of the Aborigines in Australia, elders present and emerging future. This land will always be the land of Aborigines. All right. In this episode, I'm going to share with you, as I said, about the ridiculous 4 plus degrees of the House of Saud dictatorial ruling system. And that's the first topic. The second topic is going to be about the House of Saud slaves or housemaids law. And the third topic is going to be about an interesting topic, which is about the House of Saud's Human Rights Commission law. Yes, we do have this law, and it's in the country's law, and we should start. This episode is actually more about the law, and I would do this at this time because it's very important for people who are watching this show will have an idea about how the law works in Saudi Arabia, and it's actually based on these 4 plus 1 degrees that the House of Saud dictatorial regime is using to rule the whole country, and of course using the law. So the 4 plus 1 degrees is actually about the king's decrees or decisions that he wants to apply to achieve in the country and how the country is ruled. So the first one is called the king's command, and that one is actually a direct command from the king. That means the king, any command he gives, it will be done immediately. And also, he just wants to have this and or that, then it will happen. And this command, the king's command, is above any other law or any institution in the country. That means the king in Saudi Arabia act like a god, if God exists. So it's a direct order from the king, is called the king's command. That's the first and upper and higher law in the country. So whatever law we have in Saudi Arabia, if the king says, I want to have this, or I want to have that, I want to achieve this, it must be done immediately, without any questions, without any doubts, without any even consultation. It has to be done. That's the first ever thing you know about how the country is ruled by this House of Saud dictatorial regime. The second one is also by the king. It's called the king's decree, which is it's the second because it's not has to do with the king only, but also with the cabinet that the king himself or the House of Saud themselves have made. And it's a semi-direct order from the king. That means there is a cabinet. The cabinet is called the prime minister or the department of ministers that has been built and established and appointed by the king. And the topic, like for example, the king wants to do something, and that something has to go to the cabinet to discuss it. And that discussion is actually nonsense because at the end, after that discussion, the king will make a decision to go for it or to oppose it. Simple as that. So that's why it's a semi direct order from the king, because whether the people have talked about it, I mean, the cabinet members have talked about it or not, the king will have the final word. And the third decree, which is a supreme decree, which is also funny because the king has to do with it as well. And a direct order from the prime minister, which actually the prime minister is also played as the king. I mean, the king himself acts as a king and also as a prime minister at the same time. So he can make orders, he can make decision. The king can make decision based on, as a king, on whatever he thinks or wills or wants to do. That's the first degree, the commands king. And the second one is the supreme degree. I mean, the third one is the supreme degree. The supreme degree is also, it takes several procedures or steps in the cabinet, and the one who makes the final decision, not only the king, but also the crown prince or the deputy crown prince. We don't have a deputy crown prince at the moment. We do have the crown prince, and the crown prince is none other than MPS, the megalomaniac, psychopath, MPS, Mr. Bonso Muhammad Salman. So when that decree comes out with this name, the Supreme Decree, that means most likely the one who made the order is not just the king, but also the crown prince. It takes as I said, the discussions, the meetings, and also the explanation of that thing that the king wants in the cabinet, but the crown prince and the prime minister, which is the king in this case, are involved. So if you think about it, it's all bullshit. Sorry, I don't want to say this word. It's all funny and it's ridiculous because, after all, either the king or the crown prince, that means the House of Saud itself, makes the final decision to rule this country, whether they use the law or not. So, the fourth degree, which is called the cabinet decree, which is the prime minister council or the department of prime minister or whatever you want to call it, or the parliament, or in Arabic they call it shura. So in this degree, it's also funny because the king has to do with it, not as a king, but as a prime minister. And as I said, the prime minister at the moment, I'm not sure if I mentioned it or not, but the prime minister at the moment is not the king, because the king, nobody has any idea about where that king is or what the king is doing. So the one who's playing as prime minister is the crown prince, MPS, the megalomaniac, psychopath, Mr. Ponso. He's acting as the prime minister. So the cabinet decree will also take the same steps, the same procedures of meetings to discuss about a new project or a new law or a new order to come out and be applied in the country, only in that cabinet. And the members, by the way, all the members of the cabinet are appointed by the king and the crown prince, or in this case, as the prime minister, from the prime minister or the deputy prime minister. So that shows, well, before I say this, the decree that comes from the cabinet will come up with a new order or a new project, and the one who makes that order is not actually the members of the cabinet itself, more than the prime minister of that cabinet, and in that case is MPS. And the last decision or the last word will come out from the crown prince or the prime minister. And as I said, the staff members of the cabinet are all appointed by the king using either the king's command or the king's decree, the first two degrees of the ruling system. And the plus one degree, which is quite funny and annoying, funny, and ridiculous all at the same time, is called the king's directives or the king's direction. And that means it's informal king's command, and it means the king is just using his mouth to direct a specific department, for example, Department of Sport, Okay, the king says, I want some changes to be taken in the Department of Sport. For example, more funds, more players to come to, to make some sort of changes and make the league, the soccer league, as a worldwide or a famous league in the world, or all of these things. So what happens is it's not a king's command more than informal king's command. And it means that when the king said, okay, Department of Sport, do some work, these words that come out from the king will go to the Department of Sport people, and it will come as a letter. And based on that letter, they will have to do what the king commands. So that's funny thing, and I call it the +1 degrees. So when you look at this, and when you think about how this country is being ruled until now, you will realize that we don't have actually any sort of political life, at least political rights, political participation. We don't have political parties. We don't have freedom of speech. We don't have any sort of political ideas, ideologies in the country. The ones who rule this country, they put everyone who speaks about politics in prison. And we have a famous term that we use in Saudi Arabia, that if you speak out, whether about politics or about the royal family or about anything that has something to do with corruption in Saudi Arabia, and you were caught, that means you are gone, or you have been, or you are gone, or you are disappeared, and you go behind the sun. That's the famous term we use. That means literally nobody knows what's behind the sun. So when we say that you will go behind the sun in Saudi Arabia, it means you are gone, you are finished, you will be disappeared. That's why we don't have freedom of speech, we don't have political rights, we don't have political parties, political participation, political participation rights, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, and all of these things. No sort of political life at all in Saudi Arabia. And if you do that, you will go behind the sun. Just imagine, based on these 4 degrees +1, everyone is being enslaved, controlled in Saudi Arabia, whether if you are a human being or not. And I have shared all the needed resources if you are interested to read more about these laws in the description box below, and you can find some YouTube videos. I hope there are some of them have some English translations, so you can understand the differences more between these different degrees +1. So the second topic is going to be about the House of Saud slaves, which is Housemaids law, which is also means the new modern slavery, or the modern slavery in Saudi Arabia or in the world. Because if you don't know, you can check the history of slave market in Saudi Arabia, and the last slave market was closed sometime in the 1960s, not long ago, about maybe 50 years ago or something. That was the last slave market closed in Saudi Arabia. Can you believe that? Since then until now, the Saudi regime has come up with a new law, and that law is called the Housemaids law, or like a board that has all the rules about the housemaids and the housekeeping work. And that housekeeping or housemaids works are actually specifically targeted for those who are working as housekeepers in families' houses. And this law is a very example of modern slavery at its best in this time we are living now. And people who are doing housemaids work or housemaid jobs, they are suffering from all types of abuse, no healthcare, no freedom of movement, no freedom of traveling. They have restrictions on where to go, what to do, and they have like a lot of restrictions of their movements. And they don't get enough pay, enough sleep, enough rest, even enough holiday and traveling. They don't have all of that. They are exactly treated as slaves, but under a new law, and that law is called in Saudi Arabia is called kafala. In English, means sponsorship system. And in that system, it's supposed to be a contract between two parties, but what happens is the one who is taking care of the other party, the employee or the worker who's going to do the housework, is being literally controlled by the employer. And the employer in this case is not that office who brought those people from overseas to work down in Saudi Arabia, more than the household person, the one who is responsible for the house itself or the family, has that control of the housemates or the housekeepers. And those people, which is like almost everyone in the country, around the country, they abuse all types of working rights and human rights because they see those workers as slaves, as I said, more than as a contract between two human beings who have to do something in return. And that's it. And as when I was a kid, I want to share this with you because this law is very horrible and it makes me feel really sad. Because when I remember, I want to share this story, as I said. When I was a kid in Saudi Arabia, I used to see, like, when I go to the theme parks and to the restaurants, I used to see a lot of families. They are enjoying their time, especially the food, dinner, or lunch. And there is a person who is sitting next to them, immediately directly next to them, sitting next to them, and just doing nothing, just waiting and doing nothing. Or sometimes I see those people, the drivers, waiting outside and doing nothing. And I was wondering, like, what these people are doing, because I was a kid and I was like surprised, like, why is this happening? Like, what's going on? What's wrong with these people? And what I mean here by this question, those people who are sitting alone, isolated from the family who's supposed to take care of them because they are part of them, because they are helping clean the house, making everything look good in the house. And yet they are sitting isolated just next to them while the family are enjoying their time. So my question was to those isolated people, what's going on with them? What's wrong with them? Why they are isolated from the family members? And then I didn't know about that. When I grew up, I realized that those people are actually treated as slaves. And you can read a lot of cases. I have already put some links in the description box. You can check them out, and you can see how these people are experiencing this type of modern slavery in Saudi Arabia, just because they want to make a different, uh, they want to make a new life for their lives, for their future, and for their family back in their own countries, and yet they are treated as slaves to achieve that. Where? In one of the most richest countries in the world, Saudi Arabia. And the country, the regime itself, is making a law so they can pretend to protect those people, but actually protecting those people who are abusing those workers under this law. Because the law itself is made by the House of Saud itself, not by the people. Because I believe that if the people choose to go with this law or not, I assume that they will say no, unless if they are very brainwashed by the regime itself to tell them that it's fine, just you are better than them because you have a lot of money and they are from poor countries and all of these stupid things. then they might go for it. But I personally, I will go against it because it's against humanity. And that's the law we have in Saudi Arabia, and it's separate from the working law. They're supposed to be as one, because when you are treating another person, it's based on a contract, and that contract is based on rules set uh, by the law enforcement, and two parts has to agree with that. Otherwise, it won't be working. In Saudi Arabia, you have separate rules: one for working rights, and the other one is for housemaids or the modern slaves law in the country. Okay. The third topic is going to be about the House of Saud's Human Rights Commission law. It's quite funny because when you look at Saudi Arabia and the record of human rights in Saudi Arabia itself, you will get surprised because we do have a Human Rights Commission, and that commission has a law. And it's quite funny because that law has been made by the king, whether using one of these 4+1 degrees or not, but has been made by the House of Saud Dictatorial regime itself. And the commission itself is made by the regime itself, by the king and the crown prince. They have to come up with this commission, the Human Rights Commission, to tell the world that we have human rights. We have some sorts of human rights, one way or another. So we do have a commission that looks after human rights, and it's quite funny, annoying at the same time, because this Saudi Human Rights Commission is made, as I said, by the king, by the House of Saud regime, and also the president and deputy president and almost all the members of the Human Rights Commission of Saudi Arabia, all of them are appointed by the king or the crown prince, not as a king, but as prime minister or deputy prime minister. So technically and literally is by the king, but with different names. And not only that, this Human Rights Commission of Saudi Arabia is linked directly to the king himself. So whatever happens in this commission goes immediately and reported immediately to the king himself to know what's going on. So the establishment itself of this Human Rights Commission law of Human Rights Commission in Saudi Arabia is all played by the king and the royal family itself. Even the law itself, the members, and the reports that I'm going to share with you, how they are making it to make it look like they care about human rights, so the world can see that, yeah, okay, there is some sort of human rights in Saudi Arabia, but in reality, no. And when you look at the reports that I have provided in the description below from their website, the Saudi Human Rights Commission, they have provided a lot of reports for the past few years in different languages, especially the latest one in different languages. And when you look at them, you will actually get surprised that the first topic they're talking about was about women's rights, not women's rights, more than about women's reforms. And again, when you look back at the past few years, at least the past 5-6 years, you will notice that there were like a lot of reforms have been made towards women's, not because they really care about women's as women's or women's rights or freedoms, because they want to care about those as well or not, more than because they want to deceive the world that, well, we are improving our women's situation in the country. And yet, here are the reports. You can look and see, and you can tell, and you can ask any woman in the country. Of course, if you go down to Saudi Arabia and ask the women, they won't say anything wrong about the government or the House of Saud regime more than they are doing good. We are more free, we are more happy, we can drive, we can travel. And that's actually because they can't say anything else than those. Otherwise, they will go behind the sun. So when you look at the reports, you will see that the Saudi regime is talking more about the women's and what women are doing now in the country. They can work freely, they can travel freely, they can live freely. That means independent from their family guardianships, and also they can drive the car, and they can like basically do more than uh, they can do like what the men do in the country, but they are not doing all of that to tell you that we do have human rights more than that. Okay, if you care about women's rights, okay, we show you the evidence. We have made this, we have made that. And all of this is made or have been made by the king or the prime minister, sorry, the crown prince. And the reports is not actually focusing about the human rights, the very basic human rights. And when I say the very basic human rights, I mean freedom of speech, freedom of expressing your views, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, freedom of speaking out, freedom of criticism itself. We don't have all of that, and they never and they will never talk about that. You will never find these in the reports in any language. Well, they don't have all the language, but they have the more spoken language in the world. Like I think Spanish, French, English, German. I'm not sure if they have Chinese or Russian. And if they do, you won't see anything about women's or human rights, the basic human rights. There are, of course, other basic human rights, but they're not taking those rights as rights because they don't believe in rights in general, more than as uh, a blackmail to blackmail people when they grow up. And what I mean here is the education. We do have free education. We do have free healthcare, and yet those are not as rights. They are not telling you this because it's your human right to have free education or to have education or access or easy access to education or healthcare. More than that, those rights are actually grants by the king or the royal family. So we give it to you. So when you grow up, you will always remember those free access to education or easy access to education and healthcare are made by the king, not because it's your basic human rights. And this what I wanted to share with you. And uh, it's good that it's less than half an hour because that's my plan to make those shows or episodes for this show. And you always can look up at the description box for more resources, for more readings, so you can have your own research, you can have your own understanding of what is going on in Saudi Arabia. And this episode was about more about the law and how the system is ruled by the House of Saud Dictatorial regime using the 4+1 degrees. And before I finish, please share and subscribe and spread the word, and look up at the description box the resources that I have provided down there. And I wish you a good day. Until then, this is Remy. So you know, this is Saudi Arabia. We'll see you soon.